From the outside, Liam and Rebecca Turner were the kind of couple everyone envied. They lived in a stylish two-story home in a quiet Tampa neighborhood, drove matching white SUVs, and hosted dinner parties that could have been featured in lifestyle magazines. Liam was the kind of man who made people listen. A confident real estate agent who could sell almost anything, including himself. Rebecca, a yoga instructor, had a soft voice, an easy laugh, and a way of making everyone feel seen. Together, they looked flawless. But behind the smiles and the Instagram photos, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Liam's career had taken off, and with it, his ego. He worked long hours, chasing bigger commissions and bigger thrills. Rebecca, meanwhile, felt her husband slipping away. The warmth and affection that once held them together had cooled into polite distance. At first, she tried to fix it. Romantic weekends, therapy, quiet talks over wine. But nothing worked. Liam wanted excitement, Rebecca wanted connection. They both felt trapped in a beautiful cage. Then one evening, at a friend's birthday party, everything changed. Liam struck up a conversation with another couple, Ethan and Melissa Clark. They were charismatic, free-spirited, and very open about their unconventional lifestyle. When they mentioned the private club they belonged to, a secretive, members-only, community for adventurous couples, Liam's interest was immediate. Rebecca hesitated. She'd never imagined herself in that kind of world. But she also saw something new in her husband's eyes, a spark she hadn't seen in years. Against her better judgment, she agreed to go. What started as curiosity turned into obsession. The Turners began attending events at the club, wrapped in luxury, secrecy, and temptation. It was supposed to be harmless, just fun, just fantasy. But boundaries blurred quickly. They met the Clarks again, and soon, the four became inseparable. Dinners turned into private weekends. Jokes turned into whispers. Rebecca told herself it was saving her marriage. Liam told himself it was just another thrill. Neither of them realized that this new game they'd entered, one built on lust, lies, and jealousy, would end not in pleasure, but in blood. By the summer of 2019, the Turners and the Clarks were inseparable. Weekend trips, candlelit dinners, and whispered secrets became part of their lives. What began as curiosity had turned into a private addiction, a double life that no one outside their circle knew about. Liam thrived in the thrill. The hidden glances, the danger, the lies. It all made him feel powerful again. Rebecca, at first hesitant, found herself caught between guilt and fascination. She told herself she was doing it to save her marriage, that keeping Liam close, no matter how twisted it became, was better than losing him. But things changed when Ethan began to blur the boundaries. He wasn't like Liam. Ethan was darker, quiet, controlling, and unpredictable. He would send Rebecca secret messages when no one else was around. "You don't belong with him," he wrote one night. "You and I have something real. You can feel it too." Rebecca tried to ignore it, but when Liam accidentally saw one of the messages, everything came crashing down. He was furious, not because of jealousy, but because he'd lost control of the game. For days, the Turners barely spoke. Their perfect facade cracked. Then, out of nowhere, Liam made a suggestion, one that chilled Rebecca. He wanted to end things with the Clarks, but not quietly. He proposed a final night together. A goodbye party, he called it. One last night to bring closure and maybe a little chaos. The plan was simple. A secluded lake house, wine, music, and something he called the trust game. Everyone would wear blindfolds. They'd take turns confessing secrets, dares, fantasies, no limits, no rules. Rebecca hesitated, but Ethan agreed instantly. Melissa, though uneasy, went along to keep the peace. No one suspected that beneath Liam's calm smile, a storm was brewing. Jealousy, rage, and something far darker. On the night of September 14th, the four of them drove out to the Clark family's remote lake house. The air was heavy, the sky thick with clouds. It would be the last time all four were ever seen together alive. The rain started just after sunset. Slow, heavy drops that soaked the wooden deck of the Clark family's lake house. The place was quiet, isolated, surrounded by tall pine trees and a black, rippling lake that swallowed the moonlight. It was the perfect setting for secrets and for danger. Inside, candles flickered across the living room. Wine glasses clinked, music played low, and laughter filled the space. Uneasy laughter, the kind that hides nerves behind smiles. Liam poured drinks for everyone. "To trust," he said, raising his glass. "And to new beginnings." Rebecca forced a smile, feeling a strange tension between them all. Ethan's eyes lingered on her longer than they should have. Melissa sat close to him, her jaw tight, silently watching. The game began. Blindfolds went on. The rules were simple, a mix of truth, dare, and confessions. At first, it was playful. Rebecca admitted she missed who Liam used to be. Melissa dared Ethan to kiss Rebecca. Liam laughed, a sharp, unsettling sound. As the night went on, the mood shifted. Ethan became possessive, his tone colder, his movements more forceful. When Rebecca tried to step away, he grabbed her wrist, harder than before. She gasped, half in fear, half in disbelief. Liam's expression changed. "Let her go," he said quietly. Ethan didn't. In an instant, the tension erupted. The men clashed, shouting, shoving, wine spilling across the floor. Melissa screamed. A candle toppled, plunging the room into darkness. For a few seconds, there was chaos, the sound of breaking glass, heavy breathing, a thud, and then silence. When the lights came back on, Ethan was lying face down near the fireplace. Blood pooled beneath his head, glistening under the candlelight. Rebecca froze, her blindfold still in her hand. Melissa fell to her knees, screaming his name. Liam just stood there, chest heaving, his eyes empty. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "He came at me." Rebecca trembled as she knelt beside the body. Ethan wasn't breathing. Outside, thunder cracked across the lake. The night that was supposed to bring closure had just become a nightmare. One that would haunt all of them forever. The storm outside grew louder, rain hammering against the windows as lightning flashed over the lake. Inside, panic filled the room. Ethan Clark's body lay motionless on the hardwood floor, his blood mixing with spilled wine. Rebecca sobbed uncontrollably, her hands shaking. Melissa, pale and silent, sat frozen on the couch, whispering Ethan's name over and over. Liam stood in the middle of the chaos, breathing hard, his shirt stained red. "It was an accident," he said. "He came at me. I just defended myself." But even as the words left his mouth, his eyes darted around the room, already calculating. Rebecca wanted to call the police, but Liam grabbed her wrist. "Do you really think they'll believe us?" he hissed. "After everything we've been doing here? The club, the messages. They'll say it was murder." Melissa looked up, tears streaking her mascara. "We can't just leave him," she whispered. Liam's voice hardened. "We have no choice." For the next 2 hours, they moved in silence. They cleaned the broken glass, wiped the blood, and carried Ethan's body outside under the pouring rain. The cold wind bit through their clothes as they dragged him to the dock. Rebecca couldn't watch as Liam rolled the body into the dark water. The splash echoed through the trees, and then, nothing but the sound of rain. By sunrise, the lake was calm again. The house looked spotless, as if nothing had happened. But the silence was unbearable. Melissa refused to leave. She sat by the window, staring at the lake, whispering to herself. When Liam and Rebecca finally drove away, Melissa stayed behind. She told them she needed to say goodbye. But later, she told detectives something very different. A week after the incident, a fisherman found Ethan's body washed up near the shore. The autopsy told a disturbing story. Bruises from a fight, yes, but also traces of a powerful sedative in his blood. He hadn't just been beaten. He'd been poisoned before he died. The police ruled the death suspicious. The cover-up began to unravel. And the person who held the key to the truth was the one they thought they could trust. When detectives questioned Rebecca and Liam, their stories didn't quite match. Rebecca claimed the night had spiraled out of control. A fight, a fall, a tragic accident. Liam, however, was calm, rehearsed, almost too confident. He insisted he'd only acted in self-defense. But when the toxicology report came back, everything changed. Ethan Clark hadn't just died from blunt force trauma. He had been drugged, sedated with a high dose of zolpidem, a strong sleeping medication, and none of the other three had prescriptions for it. Detectives dug deeper. They found surveillance footage of Liam at a pharmacy 2 days before the party, paying cash for an untraceable packet of pills. They also discovered Ethan had been sending threatening messages to him, messages that revealed the real motive. Ethan had been blackmailing Liam. He'd taken photos, screenshots, and videos from their nights together, proof of the Turners' secret life at the swingers club. He wanted a 50,000 or he would send everything to Liam's clients, family, and the media. Liam's picture, perfect life, was about to crumble, so he planned the entire night. The trust game, the wine, the blindfolds, all part of a trap. He'd slipped the sedative into Ethan's drink, expecting him to pass out quietly. But something went wrong. Ethan didn't collapse fast enough. When he grew aggressive with Rebecca, Liam panicked and finished what he started. Melissa eventually broke down under pressure. She told detectives everything, the planning, the argument, and the terrifying cleanup. But the biggest twist came when Rebecca decided to cooperate. She wore a hidden microphone during one final conversation with Liam. On the recording, his voice was steady, cold, and chillingly casual. "Wasn't supposed to fight back. I just needed him to stop." That sentence sealed his fate. Liam Turner was arrested and later convicted of second-degree murder and evidence tampering. He received a 25-year prison sentence. Rebecca vanished from the public eye soon after the trial. No interviews, no statements, no trace online. Melissa sold the lake house, but no one ever bought it. Locals say lights still flicker there on stormy nights, and sometimes a man's voice can be heard whispering from the lake. In the end, what started as a game of trust became a deadly lesson. That in the world of secrets and seduction, someone always ends up paying the ultimate price. In the heart of Willow Creek, a quiet farming town where neighbors still waved from their porches and the sound of tractors echoed through golden fields, lived Daniel Carter, a man built from hard work and honesty. He was the kind of farmer who rose before sunrise, worked until dark, and never complained. To everyone in town, Daniel and his wife Emily were the image of a perfect couple. The ones who made marriage look easy. Their farmhouse sat at the end of a dirt road surrounded by acres of wheat and corn. Daniel had inherited the land from his father and took pride in every inch of it. He loved the smell of freshly turned soil, the sound of rain on the roof, and the feeling of accomplishment that came from feeding his community. Emily, however, felt differently. She had grown up in the city, surrounded by noise and excitement. At first, she thought the peaceful countryside would be romantic, a place to start fresh, away from the chaos. But as the years went by, the silence began to feel suffocating. The endless routine of farm chores, the long stretches of loneliness while Daniel worked the fields, and the lack of excitement left her restless and bitter. The cracks in their marriage formed quietly. Daniel thought Emily was just tired. He tried to make her smile again, bringing her flowers, taking her to town on weekends, but nothing worked. Her laughter became rare, her eyes distant. The warmth that once filled their home faded into cold politeness. Then one summer afternoon, a broken harvester changed everything. Daniel called the local mechanic, Mark Johnson, to come take a look. Mark was younger, confident, and carried an easy charm that Emily hadn't seen in years. He made her laugh, complimented her hair, and listened to her complaints about farm life. One conversation led to another, and soon Mark started visiting more often. Sometimes for repairs, sometimes just for coffee. What began as small talk turned into lingering touches and secret glances. Within weeks, the affair had begun. Emily told herself she deserved happiness. She didn't know it yet, but her search for excitement was about to lead her, and everyone around her, into a deadly storm that no one saw coming. It started with harmless visits. Mark Johnson would pull up in his dusty pickup truck, claiming Daniel's tractor needed another look. Daniel, grateful for the help, often left them alone while he worked in the fields. Inside the farmhouse, the air grew thick with tension, the kind that hides behind polite smiles and casual conversation. Emily felt alive again. Mark made her laugh, made her feel noticed, something Daniel hadn't done in years. The thrill of secrecy gave her a sense of power. She knew what she was doing was wrong, but every time she looked into Mark's confident eyes, her guilt melted away. For Mark, it was different. He liked the excitement, the danger of sneaking around with another man's wife. But as weeks passed, his attitude changed. He started talking about money, about how hard life was as a small-town mechanic, how Daniel had land equipment and savings. Emily didn't say much at first, but the idea of freedom, a new life, far from the quiet prison of the farm, began to take root in her mind. One evening, while Daniel was away delivering grain, the lovers met in the barn. The smell of hay and engine oil mixed with the heavy scent of summer rain. Mark leaned close and whispered, "What if Daniel wasn't around anymore?" Emily froze. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mark didn't smile this time. "Think about it. The farm would be yours. The insurance money, too. You could start over, with me." The words hung in the air, impossible to take back. Emily wanted to walk away, but curiosity and desperation kept her there. That night, lying beside Daniel as he slept peacefully, she stared at the ceiling and thought about Mark's plan. Days turned into weeks and temptation turned into strategy. They began meeting secretly, discussing details in whispers. Mark suggested an accident, something that wouldn't raise suspicion. A tractor crash maybe, or a fire in the barn. Emily didn't say yes at first, but she didn't say no either. By the end of summer, their love affair had transformed into something darker. The woman who once dreamed of escape was now standing on the edge of a deadly conspiracy. And there was no turning back. The summer heat hung over Willow Creek like a heavy blanket. Every day seemed endless. And for Emily, every moment spent beside her husband now felt unbearable. Mark's plan echoed in her mind. The accident. It sounded simple when he said it. Too simple. Tractors break all the time. Mark had told her one night. If the brakes fail on a hill, it'll look like an accident. No one will ask questions. At first, Emily hesitated. She wasn't a killer. But Mark kept pushing, whispering that it was the only way for them to be together. He told her that Daniel was old-fashioned, stubborn, and would never agree to a divorce. Eventually, she started to believe him. One hot August afternoon, while Daniel was in town buying feed, Emily called Mark. Her voice shook as she said, "Do it today, before I lose my nerve." That evening, Mark drove his truck quietly up the long dirt path to the Carter farm. The sun was setting, painting the fields orange and gold. He parked behind the barn away from sight and slipped inside. The old tractor sat there, its metal body glowing faintly in the dying light. Mark knelt down beside it, his hands steady. He used a wrench to loosen the bolts and snip the brake line clean. Oil leaked onto the dirt floor, dark and silent. He wiped his hands, smirked, and whispered, "Tomorrow it ends." When Daniel returned home, Emily greeted him with a forced smile. They ate dinner together, roast chicken and potatoes. She barely touched her food. He noticed her silence but didn't ask why. After dinner, she told him, "Maybe you should haul the hay to Miller's farm early tomorrow. The weather looks bad for the weekend." Daniel nodded. The next morning, the plan went into motion. The sky was bright and clear. Daniel climbed onto his tractor, humming as he headed down the steep hill toward the lower field. Emily stood by the kitchen window, her heart pounding so loud she could barely breathe. Then, from the distance, she heard it, the grinding roar of the tractor, followed by a sharp metallic scream. The sound of twisting steel echoed across the fields. A puff of black smoke rose into the air. Her knees went weak. It was done. Or so she thought. An hour later, as she sat trembling in the living room, a shadow fell across the doorway. It was Daniel, covered in dirt and blood, limping but alive. "The brakes failed," he said, gasping. "I jumped off just in time." Emily's face went pale. She rushed to him, pretending to be horrified, but her hands shook uncontrollably. Daniel didn't notice. He was shaken, grateful to be alive, and convinced it had been an accident. That night, Emily called Mark in a panic. "He survived," she whispered. "He's alive." Mark swore under his breath. "You said it would be a clean job." "How was I supposed to know?" she hissed. "Now what do we do?" There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Mark said coldly, "If the accident didn't work, we'll find another way. But we can't stop now." Emily hung up, her heart pounding. The walls of the farmhouse seemed to close in around her. Daniel was asleep upstairs, unaware that the woman he trusted with his life was already planning the next attempt to take it. She thought she could control the situation, but she didn't know Daniel had begun to suspect something. The truth was already stirring beneath the surface, ready to explode. The days after the tractor accident felt strange to Daniel Carter. Everyone in town called it a miracle, that he survived a crash that should have killed him. But something about it didn't sit right. He had been fixing tractors his whole life, and brake lines didn't just snap like that. It wasn't wear and tear, it was deliberate. Someone had cut them clean. Daniel's mind turned the question over and over, who would want me dead? He thought about money debts and land disputes. Nothing made sense, until he remembered Emily's strange behavior. She had been distant for months, almost cold. Lately she had started locking her phone and whispering when he entered the room. At first he pushed the thought away. She's my wife, he told himself. She'd never, but the doubt grew louder each day. One evening, while Emily was showering, Daniel picked up her phone. His hands trembled as he scrolled through her messages. Then he saw it, a series of deleted texts, only partially recovered. Phrases like, "It's done. He didn't die. And we'll try again." His heart dropped. There was another name attached. Mark J. Daniel knew exactly who that was. The mechanic. The man who'd been around the farm a little too often. He sat in silence for a long time staring at the phone. The betrayal cut deeper than the crash ever could. But instead of rage, a strange calm washed over him. He wasn't going to the police, not yet. He wanted proof. He wanted them to confess with their own words. The next day, Daniel drove to town and visited his friend, Sheriff Tom Walters, an old buddy from high school. Without naming names, Daniel told him everything. Tom frowned and said, "You're walking on dangerous ground, Dan. But if you want the truth, we'll get it." They came up with a plan. Daniel would act normal, maybe even more loving, while the sheriff installed a hidden camera and a small microphone in the barn. If Emily and Mark were planning something, the evidence would catch them in the act. That evening, Daniel returned home with a smile, pretending nothing was wrong. He kissed Emily on the forehead and said, "You know, I've been thinking maybe we should take a trip after harvest. Just you and me." Emily forced a smile, her eyes flickering with guilt. "That sounds nice," she said, though her mind was already spinning. Later that night, she met Mark at the barn. The smell of gasoline hung in the air. They spoke in low whispers, unaware that every word was being recorded. "This time it has to look real," Mark said. "No more accidents. We'll make it look like a fire. You'll say you were in town, and by the time they find the body, it'll be too late." Emily hesitated, tears glistening in her eyes. "I don't know if I can do this, Mark." He grabbed her arm tightly. "You've already done too much to stop now. You want a new life, don't you, with me?" She nodded weakly. "Yes, with you." In that moment, the camera captured everything, her confession, the plan, and the intent. The next morning, Daniel handed the recording to Sheriff Walters. The sheriff listened, shaking his head. "You were right, Dan. She's in deep, and that mechanic's worse. But if we're going to catch them red-handed, we need them to try again. Let's set the stage." That night, Daniel told Emily he was working late in the shed. He left the lights on, parked his truck outside, and quietly hid behind the old water tank just out of sight. A few hours later, a shadow crept toward the barn. It was Mark. He was carrying a red gas can. He poured it around the barn doors and struck a match. But before the flame touched the ground, headlights flashed across the field. Sheriff Walters' truck skidded to a stop. "Drop it, Mark," the sheriff shouted. Mark froze, but before he could run, 2 deputies tackled him to the dirt. Emily came running out of the house screaming, "Mark, what are you doing?" But the sheriff already knew. "Save it, Emily," he said. "We've got everything on tape, every word you said." Emily's face turned pale. She fell to her knees, sobbing. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she cried. "I just wanted out." Daniel stepped out from the shadows, his expression cold. "Out about Emily? Our marriage, our life. You could have just left." She looked up at him, guilt and fear etched across her face. "You don't understand. I felt trapped."